Thank you, Elisa, for that warm welcome. My name is Diana Levine. I am the Director of Alumni Career Services. Welcome all of you today to CMC session on preparing yourself for board service. Just for a quick snapshot on me, I'm the Director of Alumni Career Management here at CBS, where I oversee our individual advising, online resources, and career programming for all alumni. I've been with the school for 13 years. The first 11, I supported our full-time students before moving into my current role. I have 18 years of career development experience. I was with NYU Stern, supporting their working professionals, their executive MBA and alumni before joining CBS. I am a Duke proud alumni for any Blue Devils in the house, and started my early career in consulting at a boutique strategy firm called Maricon Associates before getting my MBA at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business, where I focused in marketing, and then spent the next several years in brand management as a brand marketer at PepsiCo's Quaker Oats division, Cadbury Schweppes, and Unilever within their home and personal care before pivoting into career management. I would love each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Jason.
Good afternoon. How are all of you? Thanks for having me. Jason Henderson. I'm a partner at Heidrick and Struggles. I have the pleasure of leading our PE consulting practice. We are essentially about 150 consultants around the world that help our private equity and investor-backed businesses with their executive, board, and organizational solutions. I've been in the field for 20 years, and prior to that, I grew up in GE and J&J as an M&A guy. So,
thanks, Jason. Raji.
Hi, all. I am Raji Kalra. My 20th reunion was last year, and I started my career in management consulting at what is now Accenture. Went to boutique consulting, doing mergers and acquisitions. Have since business school been mostly in the social enterprise space, for about 20 years now. Currently, I run my own sort of shop doing fractional CFO, COO work for mostly nonprofits, social enterprises, INGOs, and startups. And I'm currently at Action Against Hunger and Middle East Broadcast Network.
Leo, a good friend of our office.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. My name is Leo Espinoza, and I'm a partner at Spencer Stuart in Houston. By way of background, I spent a few years in forensic accounting. I did many years in management consulting, and for the past 18 years, I've been doing executive search and board placements. I split my time between what I would consider board searches, and that is looking for board members for companies of all different sizes, whether they're public company, private equity backed, et cetera, across industries and across geographies, just because of the cross-pollination that takes place in the boardroom. The other part of my time is spent on C-suite executive recruitment in the industrial sector. And so it's great to be with you today. EMBA 2002.
Graduated 97, like the majority of the panel, started out in consulting, mostly in restructuring work, did the Unilever restructuring. But for the last 5 years, I've been investing in AQAL. And my role here is because I've sat on several boards, starting even before I graduated undergrad, and have been at least a few dozen boards, which we plugged in many of the CBS alum and students to do projects.
Thank you all. Okay, so we're going to start the conversation broad, and then we'll narrow in. So the first question is, what are the roles, responsibilities, obligations, and motivations of serving on a board, and how do they differ for corporate, private advisory, and nonprofit boards? So perhaps Leo and Jason, you want to talk about it from a corporate side first? Go for it, Leo.
Okay, so a few things. One is definitely the strategy, and that is the development, the monitoring, the accountability of the strategy. Different than the design of it. So it's not the design, but it is the development and having a voice in that. Governance is a core responsibility in the process. CEO selection and succession. We interview boards all the time, and that's consistently one of the top factors that they look for in terms of what their core responsibilities are. And so those are kind of the primary. There are a lot of other things that go into it, but Jason, yeah.
Yeah, I would say mentoring and providing a backstop to the C-suite around solutioning, around go-to-market, around kind of narrowing the option set of how might we go to expand into certain business strategies, et cetera. I think the other thing is there's a fiduciary responsibility when you're on a board, right? I mean, you are responsible for whether it be the shareholders, sponsors, the venture capital, whatever. I mean, you are ultimately there to make sure that the company says what they're going to do and then does it. And there's an accountability factor as well. Good board members will, kind of almost man and woman mark those C-suite around what am I accountable for, what are you accountable for, and how do we hold ourselves accountable. My mouth is big, but it's not that big.
I would say it's not much different, if honestly, at a nonprofit board. It's strategy, accountability, governance. We are also responsible for identifying the next executive director or CEO. The CEO or executive director reports to the board, so you have that responsibility. And we are fiduciaries of the organization, so that you don't take it lightly. You need to know and make sure that the organization is fiscally sound and sustainable and has a good runway and plan. And I guess you're involved in the strategic plan to some extent. It really depends on the committees you sit on. There might be some more fun things on the nonprofit side. It might be like a gala committee, but aside from that, they're really similar.
Actually, the size of the organization, more so than whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit or public or private company. Then a smaller company or smaller organization, the board members take a much more bigger role, and operationally, the teams depend on you more. So if you have a small nonprofit or even a startup, you're more hands-on as a board member, whereas your expertise is more important when it's a larger organization and they need the risk management skill sets. Right now, everyone's looking for AI skill sets. So I think it depends more on the size of the organization versus whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit board.
That's a perfect segue into my next question, which was all about how the size and stage of a company actually influences a board mandate.
What Tess was saying was exactly true. I mean, at a startup or a smaller organization, you have what I call an operational board. You are really hands-on. There might not be a staff or a team for every sort of functional area or very developed, and so they'll look to you for expertise on like developing basic things or like advising on like HR policies. It might be really granular at the beginning, and then as the organization or company starts to grow, the board also morphs and changes into more strategic advisory, less hands-on. And in the nonprofit space, it becomes more of instead of an operating board, it's more of a fundraising board. But yeah, definitely.
Actually, I have a question. How many people here is looking for a board opportunity? Raise your hands. And how many have been on boards before? Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're not repeating ourselves, right?
No, you're good. Mine's working.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add in terms of, I agree with the stage of the business. And so if it's a startup, it is going to be very operational. You'll get into things such as the funding. It's a much bigger time commitment than maybe a public company board that's already well established. And the differentiation also then is switching to a much larger publicly traded company. It's going to be about governance and probably 200 to 300 hours per year, whereas a startup, it's going to be a lot more than that. And then I've worked on boards where they have come out of bankruptcy, so it was a complete rebuild of a board, and those can be very intense and very time intensive. So I think understanding the stage, the life cycle of it will also determine how much time the board will take.
Okay, so my next question, and we've touched on this a little bit, but it sounds like a lot of people in the audience have already served on boards, and many are looking to join boards. From your experience, would love you to share with the audience the benefits as well as the risk of serving on a board. And we touched a little bit around the associated time commitment, but I'd like to just set the parameters so that people understand those things. And Jason, let's start with you this time.
I think from a benefit standpoint, you build personal relationships with board chairs and board members over the years, and these are amazingly successful people. You're compensated, but it's not anywhere in the ballpark of what these people need. And so you get to know them, and why do you do it? And the benefits are often the relationships that are built, the stewardship and the responsibility that you get to keep. Many board members are, I want to stay in the game, right? I want to stay fresh. I want to stay current. And then just think in general, it's a shared goal. Ultimately, a lot of successful leaders really like the pursuit of, it's a shared goal. It's bigger than I am, and it turns out to be a calling. So many of these folks become quote unquote addicted to that board service, and do it in different ways, of whether venture capital or corporate or non-for-profit. It becomes just something that become very, very good at, and that pattern recognition kicks in. And I think that's when it becomes a win-win for all parties. I think from a risk standpoint, I do a lot of coaching of board chairs, and I have to remind them, you're not the CEO anymore. Many of them were, or you're not the CFO. You're not, so where does your responsibility start? Where does it stop? And that's probably the one risk, and it's a good risk, which is like, you care so much, your heart's in it so much, right? But we'll often say, like, okay, you remember that role, you remember the empathy that you had when you were in that role, and where should you stop? Where should you go into it? But in general, I think it's for every risk, there are an overwhelming amount of benefits for folks on boards.
Tess, from your experience on the nonprofit side, are there additional benefits and/or risks that you want to outline for the audience?
So I'll share a very interesting story that I shared with Diana. Was that so I served on the Inner City Scholarship Board, which is it's a division of the New York Archdiocese that serves all of the 126 Catholic schools. And for years, I'd say it was probably a good 10 years that I was involved, but I had recruited I was at the time with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I recruited the office managing partner of the New York region to join me, and I had invited him over to Cardinal O'Connor's residence. But over the course, when he became the global CEO of PwC, and at that time in 2001, PwC was the largest professional services firm in the world. We had about 165,000 employees in 156 countries. Because of his experience with me for that 10 years, he called me because I had already left PwC at that time. I had gone to us to be the number two at another startup, and he recruited me, was relentless about it. Said, I need you to come work in my office because I know you know all these CEOs. I know I want you to be part of my team. But it was because he had seen me for 10 years working with these with all of these Catholic schools, and he wanted my expertise in helping him manage, or doing all the strategic opportunities within the firm. So that was a very, very specific, where I tell people, you don't know where the opportunities come. And I can't tell you how many clients I've gotten from, whether it was, I was the founding for the junior committees for the New York City Ballet, the Guggenheim Museum, the MoMA, back in the 80s, when these were all just starting the junior boards. All of my relationships from those formative years came from that.
Thank you.
I actually have a similar story. You never know where the opportunities are coming from. I was working at what's now Dream Charter School, Harlem RBI, and unfortunately during the first recession, or in 2008, I was LIFO'd out. And a board member from that board actually reached out to me, and she said, hey, are you looking to stay in charter schools? I'm like, absolutely not. I want to transition to something else. I want to not get pigeonholed. And she's like, oh, well, my best friend, we worked together out of college. She runs this museum. And they're looking for someone who has your experience in real estate finance and whatever. And I was like, great. Put me in touch with her. She offered me the job. I was like, can I meet the team first before accepting? And we're still friends today. I'm still in touch with that board member today. I think also some of the other benefits for me is, it just, as an executive, it makes me a better executive, because I learn stuff from boards and vice versa. I'm constantly hearing, and if I'm sitting, for me, my sweet spot is 2 boards at a time, not more than that, but I've done more. But because organizations struggle with similar things at similar times because of what's happening around in the economy and the world around us. And so if you're learning from one board meeting, or even your company, you bring that knowledge and expertise back to that board, and vice versa. So I absolutely believe serving on boards has helped me not in my career as well.
Thank you. So we've talked about the roles, responsibilities of being on a board. We've outlined some of the benefits and risks and time associated. I wanted to turn the conversation a little bit more to board recruitment. And this conversation or question can be for anyone, but as you are recruiting board members, are there certain attributes that you think really make a candidate stand out? Leo, if you want to start with that, that would be great.
Sure. So I think the number one thing is every search is bespoke, and so the criteria, it depends on the company, it depends on the industry, it depends on their life cycle, where they're at. Growth, is it a turnaround? And so just really understanding the dynamics of the company. And so therefore, not everybody is going to be relevant for every search. We are seeing a lot of trends in terms of AI, as you can imagine. Every industry seems to have an interest in how do we really accelerate that, and are we asking the right questions? And so there are trends, such as AI that we see. I think that we've been doing analysis on this for a number of years, and 30% last year of the S&P 500 new directors, they're CEOs. They're CEOs, former CEOs. 27% are financial experts. So you've got 57% right there that come from two populations. But then what are the other areas that they're looking for? And it is the P&L leaders, it is the functional leaders, but positioning yourself and know thyself and recognizing where you can add value. So then when you get the call, you can highlight what your skill set is.
Jason, in terms of your recruitment or experience, are there other things that you really think makes a candidate stand out, not just table stakes, but that can be really differentiated when you are looking at board recruitment?
When you think about what a board member does, I talk about the continuation of selling and telling, right? You are in a higher accountability function where you can simply tell the C-suite, no, we're not going here, we're going there. But the rules of how you motivate and inspire and engage apply up and down the organization. And so what we're really looking for is people that can be influential, people that can build trust very quickly. When you think about the amount of times that the C-suite and the board has contact with, it can be high empathy, it can be high trust, it can be high collaboration in spite of a contentious disagreement of where the company goes or what is the bottom line or what are we doing with the profitability. So ultimately, I'm looking for individuals that can sell. Can I sell? Can I influence? And then the other thing is becoming more and more apparent for the boards that we see a lot of is can you fundraise? Can you fundraise? Can you sell the organization? Can you sell in the media? Can you sell in the industry? Can you represent that organization as not only the career of yours, but where is the organization going? What does that growth curve look like? And how can you get individuals to be excited about it as well?
And I'd love Tess to comment. Go for it. You already read my mind.
I was going to mention CBS and Allison's program is where we've actually recruited for the American Composers Orchestra, I think even Carnegie Hall, and another one. The Columbia Business School Nonprofit Board Leadership Program is where we've actually found board members. And I can't say enough. So how old is the organization now? So it's almost 20 years. And the very first crew, there was three alums, and we each sat on like maybe 5 nonprofit boards at the time, and it was an experiment that they were doing, and they said, we'd love to get our students more involved with nonprofit boards earlier versus later in their careers. And what was amazing was that as these organizations get to know these young students in their formative years, because a lot of the MBA students ended up volunteering with these organizations afterwards. They became very close to the organizations. And once you develop a relationship, that's when you become great material for a board member, because then the boards and the organization knows these individuals. So I would say, like, for all those looking for a board, it's literally who are you involved with, who do you spend time with, and who knows you best? Because I think it's less about being recruited by a placement. It's more about your networks, that you get placed into any of these boards, for-profits or nonprofits. It's somebody who knew you or somebody else, one of their friends who knows you, because they're looking for someone specific. But as Jason said, it is the most valuable contribution to a board is your ability to either bring in revenue if it's a for-profit or fundraising and donate if it's a nonprofit.
Amazing. Leo had touched on some board trends in board recruitment, specifically AI. I'm wondering, are there other trends outside of AI that you think are really prevalent in 2025 that you can share with the audience?
I would say two. One is the amount of involvement when you talk to board members and say, how much time are you spending on a board? I would say most have said since COVID, it's doubled or tripled. Now, the good news is the world has become much more flexible. So, I'm old enough to remember when everything board had to be face to face. So you'd have to go to some location and we'd all have to meet. Boards have adapted just like most organizations are, but the time involved has doubled. It's tripled. Contingency planning, thinking about things around, what's around the corner, the unforeseen things that keep happening to us in the world over and over and over again. I would say the other thing is the ask of boards, and I'm sure Leo sees this. The recruitment of board members now, it's much more specific than it used to be. It's no longer, I need a financial steward and somebody who has pattern recognition for an e-commerce business, right? That was 10 years ago. Now it's, oh, by the way, I need that person to be left-handed, and I need him to run a 5-minute mile, and I need him to be able to have sold to Walmart and know how to get raw material out of Brazil, right? I mean, it's just much more specific in what they're looking for. And so for individuals like yourselves, it's really about know thyself. What is your differentiation? What are you really good at? What's your superpower? And what is your passion? What's your energy? But I would say those are two trends that I've seen last 5 to 10 years.
And I would say
One
more
for-
recently.
oh, go- sorry, go ahead.
In more recently, right now in the nonprofit space, especially with all of the things happening in DC, we are seeing a lot more emphasis on legal, on strategy, on restructuring. My one of my clients right now, they're 100% federally funded. They're a sister organization to VOA, and we're currently suing the Trump administration, but had to find pro bono lawyers because we can't use federal funds to sue the government. Makes sense. So we found lawyers. They're great, and we're winning, which is amazing. But they are drawing it out as long as possible. And in that time frame, the board has stepped up, and we are meeting weekly. That's not normal, right? Normally, you meet quarterly, maybe monthly during like some upswing. But we have weekly board meetings just to discuss what's happening. And so, and we rely heavily on a couple of lawyers on the board to help guide us. So it really depends also what's happening in this space in the industry. And so right now I feel like that's what's happening.
Because of the administration, there's been a significant cut in funding to educational institutions and performing arts. So if any of you are involved, those of you looking for a board opportunity, if you're currently involved or volunteer or even are, you like to see a certain or see any performances of a certain organization, go ahead and start volunteering with them. Because if you step up in they're in the biggest need right now. They're desperate for resources. They're desperate for help. You came through for them like during this period of time. Their boards, it's amazing. Our board is supposed to be, our charter says like maybe up to 32 board members and one of the nonprofits, but right now we only have 15. So they've got room for 15 to make that immediate ask. But if you get involved right now and offer your services, whatever they are, to these struggling organizations who are fighting right now, I think that's a huge opportunity right now.
Thank you, guys. So I'm hearing a few things. I'm hearing, in terms of trends, the time commitment of board members is doubling, tripling. I think Raji said they meet weekly on some of her boards. So just know that time commitment is increasing. Obviously, anyone that has expertise in legal expertise is going to be valued. So I'm hearing that. And then the concept of volunteering for those of you to get your foot in the door with organizations, whether they're struggling or not, as Tess said, is a great way to build your network. So those are some themes I'm hearing. I think I have 1 to 2 last questions before I open it to all of you. And we've talked a little bit about this, but my question is, how can candidates best prepare for board positions and build relevant board credential skills? That's part 1. And what suggestions do you have to help them build their network? So Leo, do you want to start that?
Sure. I think in terms of preparing for it, I think it's looking at the trends because they don't, I talked about 30% were CEOs, in the S&P 500 last year. 27% were CFOs. So we need a, QFE, a qualified financial expert, to sit on a board. But those numbers don't change that significantly from year to year. Went back through the data and looked at it, and so maybe it's 29% in one year and then 28. So those are good, solid, safe bets. There are always trends. ESG was a trend for a period of time. We've really seen that diminish over the past several years. AI is an uptick right now. But the other element that is really important is just getting operational experience, because the Nom/Gov committee, they want to demonstrate to shareholders that the company is in safe hands. And so who understands their business? So yes, you want to diversify. Yes, you want to bring all these different skill sets, but you need somebody that understands your business model and has had the responsibilities, whether domestic, international, and really knows how to operate a business. So I think it's driving, if you're skating towards the puck and figuring out, I want to be on boards, it's making sure to have that P&L responsibility, that operational responsibility, maybe, a financial, background, because those are important. And then one other thing that Jason mentioned, which I think is very key, is we hear a lot of companies talking about the voice of the customer. So maybe they aren't in that direct industry, but they are a huge buyer and have been historically. So just understanding the mindset of who the end user is, the end customer, that's another element.
Thank you. Others that want to comment in terms of helping the audience understand how they can best prepare for board positions and/or network to find those roles?
I'll add one just because I'm very much in the space economy right now, and that's a segment that people aren't really looking at, especially from the Northeast. I'm sure Houston it's big, and I'm sure if you're in Florida or in California. But one of the things also is about the new business model. So yes, you should be as, the CEOs or CFOs or the traditional C-suites, but also if you can get operational experience in the brand new business models that are going to be coming up with quantum computing, right? So Google put out the first qubit in December. Microsoft came out in February, which means everything up until this time has been linear growth. That's a traditional growth model. We are now, the potential of once quantum computing comes live, which it will be, it's no longer an if, it's a when, then we're going to be in exponential models. And so there's all this unbelievable, very creative new business models that I'm seeing with respect to how are people monetizing data sitting on a satellite right now? How are they creating new business models in new segments? And that's what Elon Musk is doing with his Starlinks and all the services offered off those satellites. So if you can get into a new, if you can't get to the traditional CEO because you're not in line for it now, embrace a new opportunity in a new segment with a new, whether it's a new market or new technology, because at least that's something that you can become CEO of faster than if you go through the traditional route.
One of our challenges in recruiting for boards is conflicts of interest, right? I mean, I need somebody that knows e-commerce and oh, by the way, we have a great candidate, but they're in e-commerce and they have a day job, and that's a complete, it's a deal breaker right off the bat. And so when you think about the relevancy and you think about the skill sets and you think about what they need, when we have board candidates that can do the math for us and say, okay, this is why, I'll give you a really relevant example. B2C healthcare services. We were it took for the longest time, and we had somebody that said, well, have you thought about B2C retail services? And hadn't done the math, but an actual candidate said to us, well, I'm in an open discussion. Well, to be honest with you, what we're doing around point of sale and expansion, et cetera, is really relevant. And so we took a flyer and we said, let's call a meeting. And sure enough, the board said, we absolutely have to have this person. And so the fact that they had done the research to know that this is what the ask is, this is where they were taking the company, the conflict of interest was very clear, but I can make an adjacent industry work and add immediate value. In that case, that's what really turned the search around. And it's just knowing what that organization is trying to do and how they're trying to do it and where they're trying to do it is so valuable for people preparing for, I want to get into the pipeline for board service.
Thank you. So those are the prepared questions I have. We have about 25 minutes left, and we would love to hear from all of you. We have some mics, I think, going to be running up the floor, but, oh, can we grab it? Yes. So I'm going to start with, I guess, the gentleman here on the left. Sorry to make you run, Andrew. Can we give the mic to the gentleman here on the left? And let us know if your question is for all of the panelists or a particular panelist in particular.
Hi, good afternoon. Jonathan Wu from the EMBA class of 24, CPA by training, also a project manager within the Department of Energy as well as other private equity sectors. This question is primarily for Jason, but it can be addressed to also Tess, Raji, and Leo because it may affect hunger, gender and climate, as well as energy sector. So it's about tech strategy, AI tech strategy. How do y'all navigate the inflection points similar to our past speaker, Rita McGrath, in terms of positioning your enterprises from a board level? How do you achieve the alignment within the board in terms of the tech strategy? It seems that AI is very much the talk of the town these days. I'm wondering, how are you stewarding the AI tech strategy in the midst of federal funding cuts and other economic headwinds and tailwinds? Thank you very much.
I wish I had an easy answer for that. If I did, I think I would probably be on my boat in the south of France right now, because we're all struggling with that. I would say a couple things. Number one is, in the space of ambiguity, like what we're seeing in this volatility, whether it be tech, whether it be government affairs, whether it be regulatory industries, et cetera, it really takes a very good frame of mind and cohesion of the board. And so when if I'm in a scenario like that and I'm being faced with a box that I don't know how we're going to get into and find individuals that could solve it, I'm going back to the board and talking about, okay, well, what is available and what is not, right? What are our deal breakers? Board members, I think, are wonderful about imagining the possibility of what if. But in the face of volatility, we have to create some close-ended questions. We have to reduce the alternatives in front of us sometimes. Now, is it A, B, or C? I don't know, but we know it's not D and we know it's not E. And so it often becomes, for the Leo and I's of the world, is sitting back and being the individual that says, like, what can we live with? What can't we live with? And then what are we willing to talk about? And really getting very precise on what are those deal breakers of that board member, or where our strategy is going, or what we won't do. But this is a moving target. And I think the adaptability of boards and organizations, it's just everything these days, unfortunately. So not a great answer, I know, but one that we continually wrestle with over and over.
The only thing I would add to that is that taking a step back and just reminding the board that they're governance and they're not management. And so that, because there is a fiduciary responsibility, it's asking the questions. What are we doing here? And so who on the management team is focused on that so that you are not missing that in your business model? How is it relative to the competition, to other market segments, et cetera? And so I think it's really stepping back and asking the questions in terms of what are we even doing right here? And so that's, I think, one thing that I would just add.
Thank you. Here in the red blazer.
Hi, I'm Megan Dietz, 2005. I'm curious, and this is for everyone. I'm on some nonprofit academic boards, including Columbia, and I'm curious on getting more paid boards. In the fiduciary responsibility part, have you guys ever negotiated terms for a board member where they had to meet certain fundraising goals or certain targets, tied to their contracts?
Okay, my understanding of the question is you're on a few boards and you're looking to move from the nonprofit to the corporate board, and you're curious, do you need to hit some KPIs in order to be...
I have not. I have seen, here are the expected duties. This is what good looks like. If you join the board, this is our expectations of you. I've not seen that, this is the number, this is the amount of calls, et cetera. But a very clear around, like, we want you to be the go-to resource for X. We want you to be the go-to resource for Y. We want you to run point for this fundraising activity, et cetera. That's typically a good board search, is when we know what good looks like and we're making that match very explicitly and the candidate knows what they're getting into and the organization knows what they're buying, right? That's part of our job, is making sure that both sides are informed consumers.
Yeah, I mean, you know the nonprofits have, I mean, if they're well established, they do have those like give get, what we call give get, you know, and there's sort of an annual pledge that you sign that this is what we promise to do, attend all the meetings. Like there are certain requirements, and if you fail to meet those, the board could vote to have you removed, but that doesn't happen that often. More often than not, I feel like the board member recognizes that they're unable to deliver and steps down or has a conversation with the board chair. But I don't know if you've seen.
I don't see a stated dollar amount or anything like that, but what I do see is I just did a board search for a company. They're pre-revenue, but they're actually public. They have $1 billion of backlog, but they have to have the technology proven. But at the end of the day, they also need to really expand that pipeline. And so the folks we were looking at had to meet a couple different criteria, but one was a commercial route up. You know, and so before they were CEO, COO, did they have that commercial aptitude? And now they know the operations of the business as well. So kind of a hybrid of it, but it's because they've demonstrated over their career, they've taken something from X to Y in terms of growing it. And that's what differentiated them from the rest of the slate.
Okay, the woman in the back right here. Yes, the blonde. Yes.
Steps in.
No, I appreciate all of the comments very much. So, Leah Peterson, LBS, Columbia, class of 2010. I have served on not-for-profit boards. Good to see you. Nice. I was recently recruited for a corporate board, publicly traded company listed on the NASDAQ, and it was an interesting experience. So, and it happened all very, very quickly. And I think that that's one of my first questions. It all happens very, very quickly, and there was an expectation that I had something called a board bio ready to go. Okay, I see some nods ahead. Number one, how important is the board bio? Number two is kind of could you demystify or support the notion that once you're on one corporate board, the doors start to fly open? That's sort of the next question. And then the third part of that, in the shortlisting process, it wasn't necessarily clear as to the priorities of the company at the time. And so I have an emerging market development finance background, structured finance, M&A. That was important to the company. They actually, of the shortlist, went with somebody with digital asset experience, totally opposite, but I would have had no visibility into that was a priority. So how do you sort of suss that out certainly when you're talking to a publicly traded company early on?
So I think it's very important. I don't get too caught up in whether it's a board bio or a resume, but either way, it has to be up to date and it has to show your journey and what you've done, and always looking for impact. And so where, again, have you taken something from X to Y, and we see that throughout your career. We talked about some of the trends. Diana had mentioned this a little while ago in terms of, well, what are the roles and responsibilities of a board? It's going to be strategy. It's going to be corporate governance. It's going to be interaction with the board. And so your relevance, on the not-for-profit side, highlighting that. So certainly have that on a resume, but if you have built a board bio, I think it's highlighting those key themes so that we can use that as we're talking with clients about your background. And just as a general rule, I don't meet with anybody unless they've already provided that, because I don't want to piece it all together for them. Someone should come prepared with all that information ahead of them.
How about the second part of the question? Because I feel like I get this as well as an advisor. And I think it was around, once you're on one corporate board, does that open the floodgates to other opportunities? I'd love your perspectives.
Yes.
Okay. The answer is yes.
Yes.
I remember we all had to get a job out of college or grad school, and it was the old classic: you can't get the experience without the job. I can't get the job without the experience. Is it the same thing for boards? Kinda. The difference is we're a lot smarter about networking and navigating and understanding what an organization might need and filling in those gaps and being prepared and et cetera. But there is a number of colleagues that I've known that have tried to break through And then once they get in, they go, "Wow, I'm just deflecting. I'm in no mode, right? No, not now. I can only do two. I can only do three. I can only, etc." Um, by the way, how do you break that? I think it's a couple things. I mean, the speed of a board search, when you think about using a Heidrick or a Spencer, there's a cost associated with us, right? We're providing a service, and for that service, there's a cost. Any organization is going to think about, well, how can I use my network first? And so, how do you break into that paradigm or whatnot of I can't get on the board without board experience? Well, I can't get experience on the board is always be networking, right? I mean, and this is where nonprofits come into play. This is where charitable boards come into play. This is where that networking and it does two things for you. It shows your ability to collaborate and influence and get things done with maybe not the greatest fundraising and capital in the world, and it also drives networking. It drives networking. It drives presence. It drives media. It drives your name. When the Google search happens, which is what all of our clients do, and we give them names, bam, your name comes up over and over again. Look at the things you've done, bigger than you, in a shared goal, etc. So, I mean, ultimately, yes, there is a threshold, but we're wise, we're smart, we're great professionals. We know how to break in, and you've got to use all those things to kind of get past it for sure.
Thank you. Other questions? Sure, in the middle here.
Hi, I'm Yilun Liu, MBA 2015. I currently lead biotech and pharmaceutical investments for an Asia-based private equity firm. So I got a question for those more confrontational, more hostile board situations. So I wonder if you have any advice, because what we often seen, like in those situations, are you got a lot of back channel communications, a lot of closed door communications. I wonder if you have any advice on like how to, sort of safeguard those, situations, how to manage those situations so that at least collectively you have the best outcome for the shareholders. I mean it for more in a for-profit, background.
Did everyone hear the question? I think it's around how to handle hostile board situations specifically.
Happens everywhere. I
Yeah.
don't like it.
Look, I joke, organizational dysfunction is probably our largest market share, right? I mean, some of us don't exist without dysfunctional organizations, and boards are another organization. Every situation is unique. Sometimes we're asked to come in and say this board is not effective. Can you make it more effective? And I will be honest, the longer I do this for a living, I have three questions. Do you know each other at a human level? Number two, do you have empathy for this person? Can you look at the world through their eyes? Does it feel like we're in the boat together? And then at the third level, if you have one and two, then do we trust one another? Do I giving you the benefit of the doubt? When you think about boards, they come together and then they go away. It's not like a job where we see each other every single day, right? We're together in a room or on a Zoom or on a Teams, and then we go away and we all go do our day jobs or whatnot, right? And so it's almost imperative that I give you the benefit of the doubt, because I'm going to be in a committee meeting without you in 3 weeks, but you're going to be talked about, but you're not there to defend yourself. In those kind of scenarios, we need to know, do you have my back? Do you give me the benefit of the doubt? Does someone have the respect and decency to call me and say, hey, your name came up and we weren't sure where you stand, and so we're going to ask you, where do you stand on this item? And it doesn't always work well. I mean, it doesn't. And so my coaching for anyone in dysfunctional organizations is go back to the basics. How well do I know you at a human level? How well can I get explicit empathy? By the way, assumed empathy is worthless. I need explicit empathy. You have to hear the words, yes, you are looking at the world through my eyes. And then ultimately those are the things that build psychological safety and trust. But boards, you would think that they are special and rarefied air because of the people that are on them and the networks and et cetera. They're human beings. They're human beings like all of us, and we just don't always get along. And so we go back to the basics, go back to the fundamentals. How do people get along? How do we get things done in the world? Boards are no different than any other institution that I've been around.
And it also depends, like, hopefully the leadership recognizes this too. I've been part of like board coaching, board training, retreats, and I've also instituted, like, when we have like say their quarterly meetings, at least once a year, you either tack on a retreat, and if it's not a year for a retreat, then you do some sort of mingle, so you get to know each other on a personal level, because otherwise, you're right, you're just meeting 4 times a year and then at committee meetings or whatever the case may be. And so you're not really going to form those connections. And in order to work cohesively and really well together, you need to know who's sitting across the table from you.
Thank you. Question here in the way back in the purple.
Hi, I'm Sue Jean. I'm class of 2010. I was curious, Leo and Jason, you mentioned the importance of specificity in your credentials and your expertise. Um, what if you are a generalist? I'm curious how you would suggest positioning yourself or like repositioning yourself if your skill is kind of strategy, vision, communications, branding. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that just again it gets back to just knowing who you are and what are you able to contribute. Diana had asked about the benefits and risks of being on a board. I think the other element is what are the drivers behind it, and it should be well, one, it should not be about compensation, even though it can be lucrative to be on a public company board or on a private equity board. It should not be about compensation. So let's just start there. But it's where can you make an impact, and what are you passionate about? And so I think it's really understanding, well, what is your background and what do you bring to the table? So whether it is, maybe it's not a CEO, background, maybe it's not a COO, but is there a functional leadership? I mean, what's your superpower and how are you going to be able to contribute? So that's going to be very important. But the other element is thinking broader because every board member, we do a matrix analysis whenever we start a board search to understand what skills are on there, where are you guys actually light, and so then we start to hone in on those things, so we know who to go, reach out to for the role. But at the end of the day, you also have to demonstrate the broad business knowledge and the curiosity around the business, and so being able to think very broadly, but also know what is that swim lane, what is my superpower, and then be able to highlight that. So bit generic, but it's really highlighting what you've done and where you can add value and what industries might interest you.
Inger, go for it.
Executive team members don't necessarily feel comfortable pushing back on budgetary decisions. And then you find out later in conversations, or maybe when someone's on the way out, they're like, well, I thought that those goals were a little bit, ambitious. But at the time, and as board members, we're listening to these report backs from, say, the development director or even from the CFO, but we want to empower these executive team members to really feel like they have a voice and to say, I always tell everybody the dumb question is the one that you don't ask. And you have, as leaders of this organization or this company, a responsibility for asking the tough questions, even if your CEO is saying, oh, I have all these ambitious goals, I have these targets, these revenue targets, but people who are in the weeds kind of know that that's overly ambitious, but you want to equip them as a board member to have authority to 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 really ask the tough questions. What is the best way as a board member to communicate that? Is it in the board meeting as you're sitting, because we're going through a process of approving a budget for the next year? Is it at that time that you ask everybody who's on the team to really think thoughtfully about that? Or so I'd want to have communicate it to all of them at the same time. I'm just asking you from your experience, have you ever been in that situation? And what is the advice that you might give?
Absolutely. I've been in that situation many times. I think two things. I tend not to want to bring it up at the whole board meeting as the first time everyone's hearing it. The committees, use the committees, like, and use the, and you're a board member, you should be, like, if you're sitting on the finance committee, talk to the CFO, reach out with your concerns. If you're on the executive committee, talk to the, CEO, and start to plant seeds and question and prod, so that I've asked the finance, the CFO to go back and redo another scenario of a budget before it gets to the board level, because I didn't feel comfortable and I was questioning. I was like, well, this isn't clear. How are you, so I think if you have concerns, raise them before you get to the actual board meeting, if possible. And then if there's not the opportunity, I would still maybe do it in executive session when you're like not public. I think that, yeah, that would be my recommendation.
I have a line I often use with boards, which is when the house is on fire, it's the wrong time to do fire prevention. So if I'm in a board meeting and the wheels are falling off, when we think about good board meetings, I get the chance to observe and coach and go back and say, et cetera. A really good board meeting is not a lot of problem solving. I mean, what you're talking about is problem solving. And so I can't reiterate this much. Problem solving happens way before the board meeting.
Yeah.
And it happens of, okay, let's avoid this again. I think the other thing is, does the CEO a bottleneck for the board and the C-suite? One of the things that I notice, and one of the signs of a dysfunctional board C-suite relationship, is asking the CEO, what is your mindset about managing the board? And I can tell you, if it goes board, CEO, everybody else, that's a recipe for disaster. Because I can't expect, I mean, you're missing an opportunity for creating great lines of sight between committees, between expertise, et cetera. I believe one of the hallmarks of a great board and a great C-suite is relationships, or in soccer, they call it man marking, woman marking. I love that when this board member and the CFO are tight, and this board member and the CCO, and we're working not around the CEO, but with and directly. And I think now you can problem solve. Now you can bring ideas. Now you can do it in committees or special meetings.
Mhm.
But problem solving in a board meeting is almost impossible. It's just too big of a room, and there's just way too much stuff going on. And every board meeting runs out of time. And so where are we going to claw back an hour and a half to solve, a capitalization problem? Not today. Let's solve it tomorrow.
Yeah, perfect example. I was chairing a board, and we had a meeting, and it started turning into a problem-solving meeting, and the budget wasn't ready to be passed. And I stopped that. I said, we have to have a special meeting for this, because this is not the time and place to go through it. It's not going to be passed today. Let's agree to that and move on, because there were other things we needed to discuss and review outside of that. And so we met on a Saturday and for a few hours, and we went through it, and we gave clear guidance to the staff to come back with what we needed to see in order to make these informed decisions.
We have a question up here.
Oh, hi, Dean Camaros, 2000. I've been on many not-for-profit boards for about the last 10 years, and I guess I'm curious on your perspective. What is your internal barometer say, hey, I shouldn't renew my term, or even, step away? I think that's, my experience is knowing, yes, when to join, but also what's the right time to step away is sort of just as important to know. So just curious for your perspectives on that.
Did everyone hear the question? It's about when is the appropriate time to step away from a board.
I just rolled off of one. I probably stayed like a couple years too long. I joined in 2009, and I was chair, treasurer, vice chair. I was there for a while. But they were also going through transitions. They were building a building, moving to a new office location, executive director search and turnover twice. And so they kept asking, me to stay on. And then at the end, we just did another transition to a new CEO. And for me, not that I didn't feel as committed, because this, and I tried to stay, but I felt like there was a direction the organization was going in that I had sort of not that I'd overstayed my welcome, but I'd given enough to the organization, and I had sort of left my mark and really felt like I wasn't as engaged with the new leadership. And rather than try and stick it through, I thought, I've done my service and done my duty. It's been 16 years. I think I'm well beyond my time to roll off. I probably should have rolled off when that executive director joined or right before, but I was asked to stay on for the transition again. So yeah, it's hard to say. It really depends when there's a change in leadership, it's often like a time if you don't feel like you're the direction that the organization is going in, or if there's some strategic change, that might be a right time as well. Or if you just feel like, okay, it's run its course. I've got to be the treasurer, and that's what I wanted to do, and then some boards also have term limits and board limits. So you can't be on a board for more than 6 years. You have to take a 2-year hiatus, and then you can come back if you want to. This board did not have that. So.
Tess, I'd love you to weigh in. I know you've been on a lot of boards, and the question around both adding, when is it appropriate to add incremental boards, as well as when is the right time to come off boards. I'd love your perspective.
So I've been on one board still since probably 1997, a nonprofit board, but we've transformed the organization at least. We've gone through 3 different executive directors. This is the American Composers Orchestra, but we've transformed it 3 times. And I think I know I'm still adding tremendous value because most of the board and the direction of what the organization started as a localized New York City, Carnegie Hall only. Now we're a global board. So I think it really is personal. I think it depends on what the organization needs and what your contributions are. Then there are also boards. I sit on the Accademia de Gaiato Nanotechnology Board, and it's headquartered in Italy. And that one's a board that I've been on for 3 years, and it's around STEM as it feeds into the space economy, and we're global as that, trying to make those STEM resources global. So it depends. I think when you add, it's interesting that you said that once you're on a board, it really is, the invitations, kind of grow exponentially with time. And it's when people see what you contribute, the impact you've made to these, and then you can decide which ones you really want to stay engaged with, and some where you say, okay, well, they're doing what they said they're going to do, you're done, and you don't feel you can contribute anymore. So it's based on what I feel I can contribute and what I'm getting from the organization, because very rarely do they actually, the only time they'll ask board members to step out or reconsider their term is when they don't deliver whatever. I think you had asked the questions of, there's a pledge, an annual pledge, is a give or get 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. If you're not getting those numbers, or maybe it's even 1,000, then they won't ask you to renew, or they won't, nominate you again. But I really do think that it is really it's a mutual. You can tell when you're no longer needed, and you can tell when you're not interested.
I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions for someone that may not have asked a question. Sure, the gentleman here in the glasses.
Hi, my name is Justin Tang, MBA class of 2015. I have 2 questions. One is, I think we're talking about a little bit about when is the right time to step in and step out, right? So, a really question is, what do you think is the effective size of the board, and maybe in the for profit and nonprofit context, is it different to facilitate a good board discussion? That's my first question. Second question is somewhat related to an earlier question, I think. I think we talked a lot about opportunities and benefits being a board member, but it also comes with liabilities a lot of times, right? So what would be some of your advice on the best practices where do's and don'ts, especially on the liability side of things? Thank you.
For your first question, in terms of size, it really depends. Obviously, more smaller sort of startups won't have huge boards, and even for small to medium, there's always no more than 12, no more than. I don't. If you have a well-functioning board and they have really engaged committees and they're active and it's organized, I don't think you should. It doesn't need to limit itself. And I think for larger organizations, naturally you will tend to see larger boards. But again, how effective are they? Are the committees engaged in meeting regularly outside of the board meetings? Are they actually working and supporting? Sometimes if you have too many people on the board and they're not engaged and it's not structured well, it's just a waste of everyone's time, which is why you tend to see people shy away from that, because it's a lot more work also for the organization to maintain that kind of active board. So you tend to see anywhere from like 10 to 25 and then no more than that. But I mean, I've been at organizations that had boards like well over that, but it was a different beast, I'll say.
I think, so yes, that's certainly, I agree, everything we said in terms of size. The other element you brought up is the risk. And so whether it's public, private equity backed, not-for-profit, you want to make sure there's D&O insurance. And so you want to protect yourself, and that should be one of the early questions that you get comfortable with, is that there is D&O insurance.
And it's adequate.
And it's adequate, thank you, yes. And then the second thing is due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. You know, what's the reputation of the board? How do they operate? Who can you reach out to learn more about them? Digging into the numbers. On a lot of my board searches, beyond meeting with the nom-gov committee, the board candidate will say, I actually want to meet with the CFO and I want to meet with the general counsel. They want to know what financial risks might be out there. They want to know what legal risks might be out there. So I can't emphasize that enough, due diligence, because you want to be, it's your reputation. You know, and so you want to make sure that you really make a good choice when you join a board.
I think there was one in the
One
back.
last question in the way back, please.
Thank you. Hernando Gomez, class of 2024. Very insightful discussion, appreciate, and I'm sure there are a ton of more questions to be asked, so I have a couple of questions. One, how do we get a hold of you? No, everyone's gonna rush after we're done here to ask you questions, so I already, reached out through LinkedIn, but looking forward to continue the engagement. And then second, I'm sure many of us have been serving on non-for-profit boards in the past, and then maybe transition to corporate, and I've served on the controlling, if a PE, stake on a controlling side, on a non-controlling side, and then independent board member. How do you prepare yourself for those who want to go to the next level? Might be public companies. I know you've mentioned networking, your superpowers. Anything specific that you say, hey, in the next 2 years, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, so you're ready for the next level? Thank you.
I'm happy to take the first part of that, which is, how do you reach out? Whether it's, through Heidrick, with Spencer Stuart, our competitors, we have excellent databases. And so you want to be very targeted in who you reach out to. This is a relationship, and so you don't want to just blast it out. We've seen emails like that where they've blasted, somebody has blasted out an email and it just becomes irrelevant. And so I would look at geography, I'd look at function, I would look, it's very specific, and so you can identify very clearly this person's going to be most relevant for me. So I would certainly do that. And then the other thing is just thinking that way also through your broader network. Again, Diana had brought this up earlier in terms of just the networking, but it is going to be through the law firms, through the investment banks, industry associations, and then the NACD, or if you're part of a minority, there are some really good organizations out there. I lead our partnership with the LCDA, the Latino Corporate Directors Association. There are other associations. So just kind of honing in on the most impactful organizations and people that you could reach out to without blasting everybody would be my advice.
Yeah, treat it like a job search. I mean, career center, right? I think you have to network. You figure out, is this the right space, industry, company that I'm interested in, and network and figure out, talk to people. I also think we didn't touch upon this, but there's also like ways in that are maybe more of, but less and less public facing, like advisory boards. You get experience on an advisory board, from the nonprofit space, then advisory, then you're kind of opening yourself up, and you put that on your resume and your bio as well. So there are ways to continue to expand.
And I think on the investor backside, look, investor deals are getting more complex. I mean, it's very rare that a PE firm is going to write a $7 billion check these days. They're going to have, let's get 2 or 3 different organizations together and balance our portfolio. And so having the knowledge of, I've been in a club deal, I've been the minority representative, I've been the majority representative. I mean, just understanding what is the dynamic of the organization, what is the investor footprint, how complex is the transaction, what is the exit time, the more context you have about the scenario, the more you're able to make that direct connection to impact and the immediate things that you can bring to the board. But it's an investor-backed world. Boards are more complex than they've ever been. That is a trend, and it's very rarely that I walk into a client scenario where it's just one PE firm. That's 10%.
It's also important to note that when you're talking about Heidrick Struggles and Spencer, these are the large recruiting firms. And so there's only a certain size organization who could afford their services. So, for instance, when I started joining, was it in 2014, the blockchain company boards. I mean, those types of networks that I developed was just because I was an advisor to a hackathon. That hackathon opened up, and all of a sudden, everybody who was launching a new blockchain company or whatever, they'd ask me because I was the one who understood who they could sell into, what markets they could sell into. So it's really important that you network beyond just the name brands, the big brands, because the innovators in the small companies, whether you're an advisor to Y Combinator, if people know those types of incubators for the startups, those are great sources of new opportunities, and they're always looking for advisory board members. And then later on, those open up the doors into bigger, more prominent board positions.
One of my colleagues at Heidrick has a comment. He uses this phrase a lot, which is Heidrick is not going to get you your first board. and which I say to him, lovely man, but maybe we don't say that out loud. but his point is, you're going to get your first board by networking, by advisory, by relationships. Now, I think we can help you find your first one as well, but just know that probably that first one, that first meaningful one, is probably going to be more because of you than because of us. And just have that mindset going into it. And that goes back to the recruiting and the how do you add value and the other things. And I mean, these are all go into what's the mosaic of you and why do we absolutely say we can't live without you? Know that going in.
So what's really fun is really getting involved with the current students of CBS and all the companies that they're starting. I mean, it is the entrepreneurial ecosystem is so different today on campus, on any college campus, undergraduate and graduate school. But then I tell all of my MBA mentees, I'm like, get involved with the guys in the engineering school, because those are the guys who are creating solution sets. You guys are going to finance it, and you guys are going to end up doing the economic, resource allocations for it. But it's the science, the patents, that's where the innovations are. So if you get involved via Allison's, as I said, the nonprofit board leadership, especially if you're looking to be joining a board, there's, as she said, there's 50 organizations looking for board members now. But if you engage with these young, dynamic, really exciting student bodies, I think I have 8 MBA students now. 4 of them have startups, and I'm on their advisory board just because they were assigned to me for a nonprofit. But then I find out, one guy was Microsoft, Facebook, and he's starting a new, AI service that he saw happening that no one's serving yet. So really, really easy. It's right on campus, and you can get involved as an alum. And I'm just gung-ho about our CBS.
So we are out of time, but I would love to have a big round of applause for all of our panelists. Thank you all to the audience for all of your insightful questions. We will be around for a few minutes, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Diana Levine and the Career Management Center speakers. Thank you.